right, so I'm Megan Porter, and I'm the project manager for the ADA National Network Knowledge Translation Center. And I'm a middle-aged white woman with dark hair and a ponytail wearing kind of a raspberry pink top. All right, so today, first I'll start with a little bit of social media terminology, and then get into a general background just of the ADA National Network and the work that we do. Then we'll talk about the 2024 Dual Mini Campaign celebrating the ADA anniversary and Disability Pride Month, and how that prompted the 2025 Social Media Accessibility Mini Campaign, which was an educational campaign. And then we'll talk about results from the 2025 campaign and then next steps. All right. So just a few social media terms. There was a presentation yesterday, actually, that really talked in a lot more detail about some of these um, accessibility practices for social media. So I encourage you to check out the slides from that or the recording if you didn't see it live yesterday. But some of the terms that I'll be using in this presentation are alt text, which stands for alternative text, and that's a short description explaining an image. Camel case is when you capitalize the first letters of all words in a hashtag. And I have an example here, capital L in like, and then capital T in this to make the hashtag like this. And then a hashtag itself is a way to categorize and search on social media. A hash mark or a number sign is placed in front of a word or a phrase with the spaces removed. Impressions are a metric. And that consists of the number of times content is displayed to users. Reposts and shares is another kind of a metric, and that's when another account reposts or shares your post to their feed. Social media mini campaigns are a small scale marketing effort on social media, and stock posts are a type of post that's reused, oftentimes with slight modifications. And video captions are text displayed in a video so that people with hearing disabilities know what's being said. And then a specific kind of post that we use in our social media program are Wednesday Wisdoms, hashtag Wednesday Wisdom. And those are a popular social media strategy. For our program, they consist of weekly quotes on disability, accessibility, inclusion, and representation focused on disability. And we paired those quotes with a graphic and the hashtag Wednesday Wisdom. And during social media campaigns, we select quotes that are relevant to the campaign's focus. And I have a screenshot of one of our Wednesday Wisdoms here, and it's got a picture of someone in a wheelchair on a boardwalk over a marshland, and it says, quote, "Being disabled should not mean being disqualified from having access to every aspect of life." And that's quotes from Emma Thompson. All right. So just for some general background, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, National Network, so as a whole, that's ADAN. ADAN covers 50 states, Washington, D.C., and several U.S. territories. It consists of 10 regional ADA centers, a collaborative research project, and the ADA Knowledge Translation, the ADA Knowledge Translation Center, and that's where I work. And ADAN provides information, guidance, and training on how to implement the ADA to support the mission of the ADA to assure equality of opportunity, full participation, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency for individuals with disabilities. One way that ADAN does this is, one way that we disseminate information is through social media. So just for a quick overview of our social media program, the ADA Knowledge Translation Center manages ADAN's national social media presence. All of the regions also have their own social media platforms that they manage independently, but at the Knowledge Translation Center, we manage the national social media accounts. And an important thing to know is that everything we post is accessible. So a few of those things that we always look for are that still images and graphics must have alt text and videos must have captions. Hashtags must use camel case, and any websites we mention must be accessible. And we also don't share posts from partners if their posts are not accessible. So this getting more into the main part of the presentation, back in 2024, we did a dual mini campaign celebrating the ADA anniversary and Disability Pride Month. And this is something that we do every July. And that's because the ADA was signed by President George H.W. Bush on July 26, 1990. And we have a picture of that signing there. And the whole national network celebrates the ADA anniversary every July with various events and activities. July is also Disability Pride Month. We also have an image of the Disability Pride flag on the screen. And the ADA Knowledge Translation Center runs mini campaigns for both of these celebrations every July. And many accounts want to celebrate the ADA anniversary. It's really popular in social media. And anecdotally, it appeared that many accounts were more excited to celebrate the ADA in 2024 compared to a typical year. And many accounts tagged the ADAN in posts as they recognized the ADA anniversary. However, many of these celebratory posts were not accessible. The ADAN public information specialists who monitor social media noticed that many accounts did not use alt text or captions in their posts. During the 2024 July campaign, or during July of 2024, 140 accounts mentioned ADAN in their social media posts, but 47% of them, or 66, did not use alt text or captions. So the finding that nearly half of the posts celebrating a landmark disability law were not accessible really crystallized the need for social media accessibility education. And that led to the development of a new mini campaign. So I'll talk about this in more detail in a minute, but we conducted the Social Media Accessibility 2025 mini campaign leading up to the 35th anniversary of the ADA this past July. And the purpose was to educate other social media accounts about using alt text and captions. And we did this through a two-part mini campaign. Part 1 in May was about captions, and Part 2 in June was about alt text. All right, so the educational mini campaign in July 2025, we created a logic model for it, and this is a complex image with a lot of small text, so I'm not going to describe it in detail, but you can look at it on the slides on the website later if you're interested in the details. But overall, we planned what we wanted to do and the outputs and outcomes we wanted to create, and also thought about external factors that could affect the campaign. And it actually turned out that there was quite a significant one that I'll talk about later. So the components of the mini campaign itself were an introductory post with a graphic. We used the hashtag accessible35, and that was chosen because the social media specialists wanted to encourage people to be accessible in their social media practices during the 35th anniversary of the ADA. It included new educational posts about social media accessibility, focusing on captions and alt text, and in general, just accessibility for people with vision or hearing disabilities. We shared informational resources and articles. We used stock posts that related to effective communication and the ADA. And just as a note, these didn't directly relate to accessibility practices on social media, but we're kind of in the same ballpark about accessibility and communication. And we also included Wednesday wisdoms from people with speech, language, and hearing disabilities, and also vision disabilities. And again, these didn't directly relate to social media accessibility practices, but they were community building posts that were related to social media and accessibility. We also were able to leverage a partnership for the campaign. The American Speech Language Hearing Association, or ASHA, launched a campaign earlier this year about its communication access toolkit. And the ADA Knowledge Translation Center and ASHA partnered related to their communication access toolkit. So we, at the ADA National Network, we help promote ASHA's communication access resources, and some ADAN resources about effective communication under the ADA are also being included in ASHA's resource clearinghouse. We also participated in National Speech Language Hearing Month in May for the first time. And part one of the social media accessibility mini campaign really harmonized well with National Speech Language Hearing Month. So that was just really lucky that we were able to get that to work out so well. All right. Next, I'll tell you about the results from the mini campaign. So the mini campaign ended up consisting of 22 posts that fell into 5 post types. A kickoff post, we had educational posts, shared articles, stock posts, and Wednesday wisdoms. And again, the stock posts and the Wednesday wisdoms weren't directly social media accessibility related, but were related to communication under the ADA, as well as just community building with the Wednesday wisdoms. And I have a figure here on the slide as well. It's a horizontal bar chart. And it shows, starting at the top, impressions, likes, shares, and comments. And the bars represent how many of each of those metrics we got on the 22 posts in the campaign. And by far, we got the most impressions. That was the metric that really stood out. There were over 50,000 impressions on the 22 posts of the campaign. And then there were slightly over 1,000 likes, about 550 shares where people reposted our post, and then 22 comments. On this slide, I have another horizontal bar chart that represents the number of impressions and interactions by post type. And here we combined all likes, shares, and comments into a single category, which we're calling interactions. And the impressions are represented by the blue bar and interactions are by a teal bar. And we have on the y-axis, the kickoff posts, educational posts, shared articles, stock posts, and Wednesday wisdoms again. On the bottom, you can see that Wednesday wisdoms were by far the most popular, I guess you would say. Just for Wednesday wisdoms, there were over 23,000 impressions and 880 interactions. So we can see that people really appreciated those community building posts. The second most popular type of post were educational posts. There were 14,523 impressions and 401 interactions. So together, the community building posts and the educational posts really seem to be what people responded best to. On this slide, I have screenshots of the top 3 posts with the most interactions. I'm not going to read them or describe them in detail. Again, you can go and look at the slides on the website if you want to really dig into the content of them. But and they'll be the same for the next couple slides as well. There's going to be a lot of screenshots, and I'll kind of describe the general takeaway from the slide, but not the details of it. So I think the takeaway here is the top 3 individual posts with the most interactions. The top 1 and top 2 were Wednesday wisdom, so quotes from people with speech language hearing or vision disabilities. And then the third most popular post in terms of interactions was the kickoff post for the campaign about social media accessibility. On this slide, I have screenshots of the educational posts that related to captions or other social media accessibility practices related to people with hearing disabilities. And so again, you can take a look at those on your own if you're interested in the specific content. And then on this slide are the educational posts related to alt text or accessibility on social media for people with vision disabilities. And same thing, you can check it out if you want to see the details. All right, for alt text, or this slide is comparing alt text use and post tagging us in 2024 and 2025. Because this was really the thing that kicked off the impetus for the 2025 campaign, we wanted to compare, was there an effect from the educational campaign? Did we see an increase in alt text use? And the answer is kind of complicated, to be honest. So there were fewer posts with no alt text in 2025 compared to 2024, but still over 1/3 of posts lacked any alt text whatsoever. And 1/3 of posts used auto-generated alt text in 2025. So on the one hand, that seems like it could be a good thing that there was alt text, even though it was auto-generated. However, auto-generated alt text is usually not useful or is inaccessible because it frequently incorrectly identifies or poorly describes an image. So this means that overall, in 2025, 72% of posts were inaccessible or not usable or not useful, compared to 47% in 2024. The figure on this slide is it's a vertical bar chart, stacked bar chart, and it shows the same information. The left bar from July 2024 shows that 47% of posts had no alt text, and the right bar, the dark blue box on the bottom, shows slightly fewer, 39% had no alt text, but stacked on top of that is a teal box that shows that 33% had auto-generated alt text. So when you combine those, that means that 72% were inaccessible or not useful. So when we reflected back on the campaign, a big takeaway for us was that the frequent use of auto-generated alt text increased the percentage of inaccessible or less useful posts in 2025 versus 2024, so 72% versus 47%. However, we could also look at it in terms of that a smaller percentage of posts lacked alt text altogether. So it's a little bit hard to tell with the information we have what the takeaway really should be from this, about whether the campaign worked or not. Social media followers did express gratitude for the information that we provided. This was our first attempt at an educational social media mini campaign. All of our previous mini campaigns had been celebration campaigns where we acknowledged a community or some kind of an event or something. So this was a new thing for us. And the simultaneous planning of other social media campaigns and some other activities, and then also leveraging Speech Language Hearing Month as part of the social media accessibility mini campaign did complicate its execution. And a big takeaway is that ongoing education about social media accessibility is really still needed. There were still, you know, as I mentioned, like about over 1/3 of images did not have any alt text. They are still being posted, even in posts specifically mentioning that the company values accessibility and inclusion. And here I have a recreation of a social media post that did not include alt text. The post says, "We believe accessibility isn't optional, it's essential. Company's name is proud to honor the 35th anniversary of the Americans with Disability Act, ADA." So yeah, and this post did not have an alt text associated with it. All right, so some potential adjustments for future social media accessibility campaigns are changes to timing, structure, intensity, duration, basically everything. Also thinking in more detail about content and how we'd organize it. So thinking about basic versus complex content, doing how-to posts. So we specifically show people this is how you add alt text or something like that. We could potentially share findings about alt text use from 2025. We weren't aware of the auto-generated alt text and how prevalent that had become. And so, you know, talking about the issues that can arise from using auto-generated alt text is another topic we might consider for the future. And we also didn't address emoji use, which is another thing that people often use, but it's not accessible for people who use screen readers. All right, this is my contact information. I want to thank my coworkers, my co-authors, and colleagues Cassidy, Fiona, and Mark, and as well as Sarah Parker Harris, and of course Neidler, who is our funder. And please follow us on social media. We're on Blue Sky, Facebook, and LinkedIn. All right. I'm ready to take any questions.
Thank you, Megan. We did have some questions.
Mhm.
The first one is if a post is a motion graphic, an MP4, that has no audio, should it include captions?
Um, I would say yes, so that whoever like if it's just like if there's no audio but there's visuals, I would give like a written description is probably how I would handle that. So someone who has a vision disability would know what's happening in the graphic.
Great.
Yeah.
And then Instagram and LinkedIn does not allow alt text on videos. And the advice seems to be to add descriptions via closed caption. Do you have any best practices around this?
We don't use Instagram ourselves, and part of that is because of the like it's not set up the best for accessibility. We have considered it and still are considering using it, um, but without having actually done it ourselves, I don't know if I could recommend any practices really strongly at this time.
Okay.
Mhm.
Next one is what are stock posts? Your graph that had all of the, yeah.
Yeah, stock posts, they're a type of post where um, you kind of have like a basic format and you use it over and over basically. Like every month or something, you might post basically the same post, but you might also modify it from time to time. So it's kind of something you can have in your library and you can use it frequently with or without modifications. So in this
Um,
case, for this campaign, the stock posts were related to effective communication under the ADA.
Got it.
Yeah.
And I know that just for clarification, will you be sharing your findings from the use of alt text in 2025? Is that is that your hope?
Um, um, we haven't decided for sure if we're going to share those on, I assume the question is about sharing those on social media. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
or in the next um conference or in some other accessible way.
Yeah, some one of the slides actually showed the results about alt text use. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So it's here, but I think we've discussed like maybe for next time we do a social media accessibility education campaign, we might be like we found that a lot of people were using AI generated alt text, but it's not accessible oftentimes, so we might like draw on some of those findings as part of the education that we do in the future.
And so this was also from the chat. Apologies if I missed it, but did you say how you were able to tell if the alt text was auto generated?
Yeah, the social media platforms that we use at least, the like the programs themselves will have a little note, like you can like click into their post onto the image, and then it'll say, when it shows the alt text, it has a little message that says alt text was auto-generated. So the public information specialists, like they recorded all of the posts where we were mentioned, and then they went into each one of those posts to look at if it had an image, was the alt text handwritten or was it auto-generated by the platform? Yeah.
Excellent. Um, and so we saw that we have someone from the American Speech Language Hearing Association, or ASHA, was in the chat as well.
Hmm.
So, your collaboration with them is a great example of how you align campaigns. What did you learn about partnering with other organizations to amplify accessibility education? And how might you refine or expand that strategy in future efforts?
Yeah. I think it went really well. So during Speech Language Hearing Month, which was also May, which was when we were focusing on captions for the accessibility campaign, we also promoted Ash's toolkit in other posts as well, and in our newsletter. So it all kind of like worked really well. And I didn't include the specific posts related to um, promoting Ash's toolkit in this analysis, in this presentation, but they got really good engagement also. And what worked really well with that, honestly, was Asha did a really great job of developing a toolkit for partners to help the partners share their information. So they had posts that we could use or modify. Um, so that made it very easy for us and helped us understand like what content they were interested in having promoted. So I think that's a really good um, way to approach collaboration on social media is to develop those kind of toolkits that your partners can use um, to help them amplify your message and kind of get that cross collaboration.
Thanks.
Mhm.
You have said that, the ADA National Networks holds itself to high standards, and you're sharing posts that are compliant with alt text and captions. And what challenges do you face in modeling these practices while also encouraging partners who might not have the same capacity or awareness when developing their social media?
Yeah, we don't like reach out to people and say like we would love to share this, but it's not accessible. We haven't been like actively reaching out in that way. So it's we I think that this is our first attempt to really kind of like model and talk about what social media accessibility looks like and should be. And I think we definitely could do like think about how to do that to like maybe have a checklist, like, social media account managers, did you do these? Like, add alt text, don't use emojis, use camel case, like maybe something like
Hmm.
that could be useful for social media users, account managers, and that's something we don't have already, but that would be something that I think could really help people understand like what should they be thinking about in a kind of a compact format.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And finally, what are there any surprises that you sort of came up against as you reflected on your past campaigns?
Yeah, I think the big thing was the auto-generated alt text because that was not a thing in 2024, and it was a big thing in 2025. So I think that that was the big surprise. Like we write all of our own alt text, like we don't use the auto-generated features.
Hmm.
But we did not realize how prevalent it was. So that's a big surprise. And we don't know if people just had it turned on in their settings and so it automatically does it for them, or if it was a case where people think that auto-generated alt text is useful and because they don't really understand exactly how alt text um, helps people. So there's maybe some more investigation for us to do about why people are using the alt text and so we can address that in a useful way so that they know why it's not a good idea most of the time.
And we have some comments in the chat. Please
Mhm.
reach out to those folks to let them know what they're not getting right. And a
Mhm.
checklist would be extremely helpful for social media managers. And there are some other there are some other comments in the chat that might be useful to your work moving forward.
Okay.
Thank you, Megan.
All right. Thank
Um,
you.